Hey everyone, Editor Eelmite here. This video is a part of a three-part series of the rune system of Runarcana. Part 1 is about Runic Pulses, which are like passives that you acquire starting at level 1. Part 2 is about runes in general, which are active or toggleable effects that you acquire and enhance as you level up throughout your adventure. And Part 3 is about Rune Essences, which are a special type of runes that are designed as entire pathways that are some more specific use cases that you'll have to work out with your GM or with your players. So without further ado, let's get started. Alrighty, everybody. Hello and welcome to today's Runarcana Academy. Today we're going to be talking about runes and all of the cool things that they add to the system. In our episode where we talked about how D&D and Runarcana are similar and different, one of the things that I said was that the rune system is one of the most unique parts of Runarcana. I just think it's really cool that it has essentially a system of some kind of global buff that you can apply to any character, and it's not tied to a particular race or class or anything like that. So without further ado, let's talk about what runes actually are. So runes are essentially a magical ability that your character has that kind of starts at level 1 and it grows and evolves as you level up, and you also get different types of runes as you go. One of the things that's kind of neat is that every creature in Runeterra has some kind of rune. All of the monsters have their own in the creature system, which you can see in our first couple of episodes of Runarcana Academy, and your character also has runes, and I think that that's really, really neat. And it's all tied to the global world runes that exist kind of throughout Runeterra as a plan, or as a, the entire world of it. So let's talk about what runes work like mechanically. So they're divided into two categories. You have your Runic Pulse, which is like a passive, and you also have your regular runes, which are an active or a toggle in some cases. Your Runic Pulse is your awakening into the world of runic magic, whereas your individual runes, and as you master them, are your growth in understanding your connection into the runic world. When you're choosing your runic nature, that's something that's going to happen level 1, which is, again, your passive, essentially. That is going to be one of the big decisions that you make, because a lot of your future rune choices are contingent on you having selected a particular runic pulse and your runic nature at the start. As you go through the different levels, sometimes you'll get to choose a rune, but sometimes you will get to add mastery to it. And your masteries are going to be usually either making it more potent or getting to use it additional times. And we'll look at some examples of those. Our rune essences, this I'm going to read word for word because I think that they do a really nice job of describing it, and it's something that I don't have experience with as a player or as a GM, but it is something that I think is a cool part of the system. So most rune essences require some narrative situation to be chosen, such as packs, access to global runes, connection to powers beyond magic and mundane, among other possibilities. Unlike runes, a rune essence can only be chosen at character creation under the GM's approval. Through storytelling and discovering the world and runic abilities, players are often exposed to new powers, entities, and even patrons. A truly powerful patron can refine someone's runic nature into a rune essence. And we'll look at some examples of those and what that looks like. Now, for rune interaction, certain enhancements, certain heritages have the ability to connect with a rune, so it's just important to be mindful of that as you're going through. And then for your activation of the rune, you essentially have 3 options. Either it is a joint action, for example, one of them enhances your ability to use projectile weapon or some kind of ranged attack. You have a passive effect, which is something that just happens independently, and then a lasting rune, which might be a toggle or something that you choose to do that lasts a certain amount of time. A lot of these also have the ability to use them as themselves, meaning I can either enhance my attack with a rune, or maybe my gun's been taken away and I'm going to cast that rune as itself in its lone state, and we'll look at what that looks like as well. And finally, your runes are going to have some kind of save for some things or an attack modifier for other things, and that's just going to be your proficiency bonus plus half your character level, which is pretty cool. So if you're a level, 15, 16 character, the fact that your thing is going to be, plus 10 or so is going to be fantastic. And then the DC for your runes, it's the same thing, but plus 8, which is pretty standard. Let's look at what the leveling up looks like. So on odd numbers at first, and then it switches to even, and then it switches back to odd, we're going to get some additional access to runes. So we're going to start off with our runic nature, our runic pulse, and then at level 3 and 5, we get to increase the mastery of it. So it's going to become even more powerful or used more frequently. Then at 8, 10, and 12, we get our new rune and new mastery. And then 15, 17, 19, again, a new rune with 2 more masteries. So if you were to play an entire campaign from level 1 all the way through level 20 like my players are going to, they will end with their runic nature double mastered and 2 runes double mastered. The old rune system, for those who are familiar with the older editions of Runarcana, was a lot more complicated, had several different types of runes. You had a pulse, you had a vortex, and something else, a couple of other ones. And I think it was a little overcomplicated, but it was very neat. And I think that they've done a nice job in refining and cleaning up the rune system throughout the different versions of Runarcana. So on to our Runic Pulses. The Runic Pulse is the natural tune that reverberates in every adventurer. This pulse is a manifestation that develops in each being shaped by their actions, decisions, and way of acting. Each of the pulses is like a pillar that structures a foundation of personality far beyond magic, and I think that's kind of fun. So similar to the system in the creatures, we did the creature creation, our different runic pulses each are tied with a gem and each do a different thing. So Emerald, also called Sentinel's Pulse, to preserve, provides damage reduction. So if you want to be a tank, for example, Emerald might be good. Ruby is damage amplification if you're a DPS type character. Diamond is healing amplification if you're a support. Amethyst, also called Vampiric, is resource recovery, which is really, really cool. And this one is tied to a couple of resources for now, but in our last session, we talked to Ardu a little bit about the idea that maybe it could be expanded into other types of resources, which he said that I could play around with. And then Sapphire, also called the Twilight Pulse, is versatility, and it's just for a bunch of different stuff. So we're going to go through all of the pulses one by one, and then we're going to go through a couple of examples of specific runes, because I think the pulse, if you're starting off fresh, even if you start at level 3 or level 5, like a lot of players do at a lot of tables, you're still only going to have access to your pulse with some mastery, and you're not actually going to get into that rune until I believe it was level 8. So let's start with Emerald. So Emerald, when you choose it, you choose a physical damage and an elemental damage from the table to the right. After a long rest, you roll your pulse die, which we'll explain what that is in a second. Until your next long rest, the result of those die will be your damage reduction of the types you chose. At level 9, you can choose another one, and 17, you choose another one, and starting at 11, it also applies to the magical version. So to simplify that process and what that looks like, we have our pulse dice. When our proficiency is 2, so our first couple of levels, we have a base D4, and our pulse is 1D4. Then when we have a proficiency of level 3, our base is D6 and our pulse is 1D6. And these are going to increase. Our base is going to go 4 through 12, proficiency 2 through 6. And then our pulse dice, which is the one that we're going to be using for these examples, are going to stay in matters of D4 or D6, but they're going to increase. So in our example that it has here at first level, we can choose fire, and maybe we also choose slashing. So we get 2 total, 1 physical, 1 elemental. And at the start of my adventuring day, my proficiency is 2, so I have to roll my 1d4 pulse die. After taking my long rest, if I roll that 1d4 and I get a 3, for that entire adventuring day until the next long rest, all fire damage and all slashing damage is going to be reduced by 3. So damage reduction is something that is not in a lot of TTRPGs that I have played. It's usually just resistance or not. But here we can have resistance to something and it can be resisted further. So if you are that tank and maybe you want to play around a little bit and you know that the adventure that you're going on, let's say you're not doing a multi-year campaign, you know the adventure you're going on is going to be in the Freljord, well, I'm probably going to choose Emerald Pulse and be resistant to cold damage. And I usually like to go with piercing just because most ranged weapons are piercing in addition to a lot of melee weapons, and a lot of traps are piercing, but it could be slashing or bludgeoning as well. So that's our Emerald Pulse, which is kind of cool. For our Ruby Pulse, when choosing the Ruby Pulse, you must choose one of the damage types on the damage types table, which again is the same damage type, same options. And after a long rest, you're going to roll your pulse die. Until your next long rest, the result of that die will be added to your damage. So it's the exact same thing, except you are adding the damage instead of taking it away when you're taking it. So if I have that 1d4 and I roll that 3, I get to add 3 necrotic damage, or a bonus 3 piercing damage, or something to that effect. Oh, sorry, I apologize. For Ruby, you're only adding 1, so you could choose piercing, but you're probably going to choose an elemental damage if you're going to roll it with weapon attacks. If it's a critical hit, the critical damage multiplier is also applied to the boost. So crit multiplier of ×2 means that you get +6 instead of that +3. So that's also really cool, because the way that critical hits apply to different types of effects isn't always super duper clear. So it's nice that they specify that. So Emerald, we're reducing by a small amount. Ruby, we're increasing our damage by a small amount. For Diamond, after a long rest, you roll that pulse die, which again, for the first couple of levels is just a 1d4. And until you take a long rest, the damage gained on your pulse die is added to all healing you do or receive. So if you are the type of character that maybe you got very, very lucky as the DPS, and you're the Mercurial or the Marksman or something like that, and you have 3 different people who can heal you, it could be feasible to also do the Diamond Pulse, because each individual instance of healing is going to increase the amount you heal. That said, probably makes more sense for you to focus on a damage one, and your Diamond Pulse is better suited for your Acolyte or your Shaman, perhaps. And it looks like that's going to be pretty consistent all throughout. It's the same kind of thing. We roll that amount, and it heals more for each of those. Amethyst Pulse, this is the one where we have some kind of resource generation. And Amethyst, I think, is really, really interesting. And essentially, anytime you kill a target with a CR of up to 3 below you, so you can't be, a level 17 killing a bunch of level 1s, you recover points of the chosen resource, either HP, mana, or ki. So if you're choosing a Bodhisattva, you might choose ki. If you're an Arcanist, you might choose mana. And if you're pretty much anyone else, you might choose hit points. And of course, other classes might choose other things as well. Last week, we talked to Ardu a little bit about what if a Techmaturge wanted to use energy as their way to get a resource back, which we are going to play with and see how balanced that seems. If you choose mana or ki, when you use an attack that consumes one of those resources, the gain can't be more than the one that you use. So you can't spend 1 ki, get a hit, and then get 5 ki back. And it talks about the amounts that it are. Now, the question that I raised to Ardu, and he said that this is going to get some reworking. So again, as the disclaimer says, it's subject to change. Nothing in 0.96 is finalized. The interesting thing is, because of the new way that challenge rating works in Runarcana, again, check out episodes 1 through 3, you are running into something where you could have a CR5 minion that's incredibly weak, or a CR5, soldier that is a good one-on-one fight. Can I kill a bunch of minions? Or is something else going to be different? So I think that there might be like a table that has to be created to make this make a little bit more sense for the new CR system, which is a very cool system. Just would be a little confusing with Amethyst. And then last we have Sapphire. So after a long rest, so again we have once per adventuring day, you can roll your pulse dice. Until you take another long rest, the value rolled on your pulse die becomes your pulse points. You conduct any number of pulse points at a time to add that same amount to a dice result or decrease an enemy's dice roll. Oh, that's cool. So if I know that I probably need about a 15 to succeed on a perception check to spot something, and I know there's something there as the player, but my character doesn't see it, I could, maybe if I rolled a 12, but I had 5 pulse dice, because let's say I had a 1d6 and I rolled a 5, I can spend some of those pulse points to increase it. You can use it to amplify your damage or reduce damage taken, or let's see, each pulse point spent amplifies or decreases by an amount equal to your proficiency bonus You cannot use these points for rolls made if you are surprised, but you can use them to reduce the amount of damage done. So the reason that this is not not necessarily stronger than the, let's say, Ruby one, is if I roll a 4 on my d4 for my pulse die. Every single attack with Ruby, I'm dealing 4 extra damage. Every single attack I'm taking with Emerald, I am reducing it by 4 damage. But for Sapphire, if I roll a 4, I have 4 times that I can use it. Each of those times would be my proficiency bonus, so probably 2 or 3 for the lower levels. So you have the flexibility, and you're essentially saying, I don't want to commit to only doing aggressive things and only using it for damage. I want to wait and see what I need when I need it. And I think that that's kind of a cool system. So the versatility could be that one of them I'm going to use to take a little bit less damage because maybe it was going to knock me unconscious. One of them I might choose to break over a 19 on my strength save because I heard that someone else got a 19 and succeeded and someone else got an 18 but failed. I know the DC is 19. So you have a couple of options there, and I think that Sapphire is definitely really, really cool, but I think that most characters are going to want to do one of the other ones. Your Brute or your Combatant, depending on their role in the party, might want Emerald or Ruby. Your Acolyte probably wants, again, probably the diamond one because they're probably doing more healing, but they might, maybe your Acolyte is kind of your drain tank and they might want amethyst instead. But if you're not really sure, or maybe you're something like a shaman that is honestly the jack of all trade that just kind of does a little bit of everything, I think Sapphire with shaman would make a lot of sense. So I think that's really, really cool. So those are all of our pulses. So again, that's just a passive thing. You've got it. Heck yeah, good for you. Let's move on to our actual runes. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you want to see more Runarcana content in the future. And as always, please tell somebody you know that you love them because I promise you they don't hear it enough, and neither do you. So I love you very much, and goodbye.